Can't make. Oh god. Can't make a video about books without having a bunch of books you haven't read behind you. Meh. So, today we're going to be talking about 1984 by George Orwell. I read this book about 2 weeks ago, and I had a lot of thoughts about it. Mostly somewhat negative. A few positive, but mostly negative. So I understand why this book is a classic, and I'm not trying to knock it for its classic status, but I don't think it would be a classic if it were released today. It would not be highly regarded if it were released today, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to get into spoilers a little bit at the end, but not very much, and I'll tell you before I do. So first of all, my main problem with the book is that it's not a story, or not a good one, at least. There's no character, there's no ambiguity. It's very authoritarianism bad. That's obviously the message that George Orwell was trying to get across when he wrote it, and I understand why he was doing that. You know, he wrote it it came out in 1949, so a couple years after the end of World War II and the fall of Stalin. So, yeah, it makes sense why this book exists and why it was widely popular at the time of its release. I'm not trying to knock it for that. However, like I said, I think it fails as a story. I don't think it's well written. I think that's an overstatement. I don't want to say that it's not effectively written. I want to say it's not compellingly written, for me at least. I really just feel like most of what Orwell said in the book either could have been compressed down to like 50 pages to get the point across, or it could have been expanded upon a little bit with some better characters, some more arcs added in to make it more compelling. There's a complete lack of ambiguity or subtlety or anything of that matter in the book. It's, like I said, very authoritarianism bad. There's no room for any discussion there. There's no room for why do the proletarian class, basically the people who are kept down, why are they oppressed? How do they feel about it? The main character has a conversation with an old man in a bar that it's kind of framed as like this is the general opinion of most people. He was an older gentleman that was around before Big Brother was around, so before like the oppressive government took power, and he can't remember what it was like before. He doesn't understand what his problems are and how he's being oppressed. And I know a lot can change, especially when you're hungry and you're not able to think freely. A lot can change, and that can have a huge effect on people. But I don't know. I feel like George Orwell almost thinks that the common man is a fool who needs someone to guide him. And I kind of got that feeling from Animal Farm as well, which is strange because from what I haven't read his other works or his personal stories that I know he's written. I've heard some about him. I definitely need to read them, but I've heard that he's very liberal in that sense. Like, he doesn't believe that, but that's the tone that I get from the book. It would have been really interesting to see more than just like the daily lives of people, like we see them doing chores and whatnot, but I would have liked to see how they actually feel about the government that they are controlled by, because we really only see the social workers' opinion of the government and how that affects them. We don't really see too much beyond surface level of the proletarian class. Secondly, as I already kind of alluded to, I really don't think the characters are good at all. They have no character. They're basically just plot vehicles. Winston, the main character, and by the way, I had to look up everybody's name before I recorded this because I couldn't remember any of their names because they're all just so bland. But Winston, the main character, basically his personality is, I am oppressed. I need to get out of this oppression, which is understandable because, like, I guess it's hard to be more than that when you're under that kind of totalitarian regime, but it doesn't make for a compelling character. You know, there's nothing about him that I found compelling or relatable beyond just his circumstance. There was nothing about him specifically that I liked. Julia was a little bit better. She had a little bit of personality. She was kind of the contrarian, free thinker kind of character in the book. She was a little bit better, but still not much. And really, I don't understand how, minor spoiler, I don't understand how she fell in love with Winston, knowing nothing about him. I thought that was really strange and just unrealistic. And then O'Brien is really the only other character in there. And he's fine, I guess. So here I'm going to get into spoilers a little bit. So if you haven't read it, here's your warning to stop watching if you plan on reading it or not, because it's a super old book and it's not that good, in my opinion. So maybe skip it if you're not sold on it already. So the main plot twist, I guess, that comes a little more than halfway through the book, if I remember correctly, just makes no sense. So basically, when Winston and Julia, when they go meet O'Brien, O'Brien's part of the government and he's tricking them, pretty much. Sure, I understand that. That's fine. Why did they continue to let them just go about their ways after they had already gotten them? Like, I understand why they might have waited for Winston a little bit to see if maybe there's anybody else that would be caught up with him before they just snatch him off the street. And even after they got Julia in on that, I could see them maybe waiting a little bit more. But why did they write that book? I really don't think that somebody would write that book and give it to them just to arrest them later, because I don't really think that that's part of the like brainwashing that happens later. I mean, I guess it could kind of be considered part of that, just tricking them into mentally breaking them down further, giving them hope and then stripping it away, I suppose. But it felt really unnecessary. Like, as soon as you have them for those crimes and you're reasonably sure that, like, they're not going to give away other people, why are you still letting them be out there and do things? Like, that doesn't really make sense to me. And so it just felt like the last, not quite the last, but a portion of, like, I don't know, 2 chapters was just completely wasted. Like, that, none of that needed to happen. Like, it didn't make any sense why it went down the way that it did. Like, why did they wait specifically until that one night when they were in the room where everybody came in? The plot twist didn't really appeal to me all that much. As far as the ending goes, it was fine having them both just kind of completely worn down and degraded from everything. Makes sense with the message of the story. Having a bad ending in the terms of, like, things turn out badly for them is not a great selling point for the story either, but I understand, like, given the construction of the book and what it's trying to do, why it was that way. But man, just all things considered, it was a slog. I would not have finished this book if it were not already considered such a classic and had been recommended to me by a friend. I would have put it down probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 chapters in, because it was not compelling. There were some good topics discussed in there. Again, like, I think doublethink is a pretty useful thing to, like, have in your mind, of being aware of that, because that's just a thing that people do, having 2 contradictory thoughts. You know, that's a thing that we all do sometimes, and it just happens. And having a word to ascribe to that can be kind of useful. I do think that the discussion around this book is also kind of overblown now that I've read it. Like, oh my God, this is 1984, literally 1984. Like, that's, no. That's all overblown. I feel like most of those people who say that probably haven't really engaged with the book all that much. Anyway, that was my rambling about 1984 by George Orwell. One of the biggest disappointments as far as books go this year, again, I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads because I understand its place as a classic and its place in history, but just as a story, did not find it compelling at all and wouldn't really recommend it. I'd probably recommend Animal Farm over this. Not that Animal Farm is perfect either, but it's a lot better and a lot more fun to read. I plan on doing a lot more reading coming up and probably doing some more individual reviews, although I won't do that with every book that I read just because I don't have all that much to say about every book I read. And a lot of the books that I plan on reading are like pseudo like educational, and I don't think would be really fitting to do individual videos about. So we'll see what I plan to do. See ya.